let's dive into some of the LCK shenanigans from this past week. We did, in fact, have a telecom war that occurred. We had the continuing fall of Guangdong Freaks. We had Hanwha versus D+, which was kind of like a battle for second best team over in the LCK, which Hanwha won. Viper, even though he probably had a worse week this week than he did the past couple of weeks, still continues to look really good. I talked on the Monty and Wolf show, if you guys want to check that out. Wolf and I had a long conversation about is Viper the MVP of the LCK this season? Right? You think you could make some pretty compelling arguments that that's the case.
It's an insane year in general, if you think about it. It's just never stopped cooking, mate.
Yep. And Hanwha just feels really well suited to this meta. Out of all the kind of LCK teams, Peanut feels like the Ivern player, the pathing guy, the guy who's going to be able to do more with kind of this weird champion in the game that is very strong right now and being played around the world. So HLE, really fun to watch. Zeka's having some good performances. Ever since they changed Corki, he doesn't have the Corki pitfalls anymore. But D+ also at the same time. Now, as we were recording this, guys, they did in fact lose to T1, so I haven't seen those games yet. So we won't be talking about them this week. But, one thing that's really fun about LCK as we head into the end of the split is it feels like each of these teams really has their own unique identity at the time being, Thorin. D+ is we're going to be the only team in the world that plays AP Twisted Fate. Oh, right, we're going to bring out the support Poppy a la G2, and we're going to have Showmaker on LeBlanc. And I saw earlier today against T1, I haven't seen the game yet, but I saw that he was playing some Silas. So there's definitely some interesting picks. And it feels like a lot of these teams are really honing in on their own identities. And it's been cool to watch. It's been cool to watch. Hanwha's, back in the Viper carry camp of Ezreal and Zeri and Kaisa, and he's been having these mega games, and it's great. So the upper tier battles in this league are really fun to watch right now.
No, the funny thing is, I know a lot of people the entire year have never been in on D+, because if you just look at the roster on paper, it's just not that crazy a roster. You look at it, you're who gives a fuck about King? And no one knew, except people who watch Challenger, apparently, that Lucid was good. By the way, he actually is a good player.
He's getting much better,
obviously,
too.
aiming. I actually think aiming was always unfairly maligned on KT, because I think people just remember the throws and they don't remember how many times he was the one fucking win condition in some of those 38-minute games or whatever. And then Kellen, look, deserves to be a meme, but actually he's had a fucking glow up. He's actually had some pretty good times. And also everyone probably thought, if you separate Canyon from Showmaker, isn't Showmaker going to be washed? I mean, if anything, he seems like he's had his bounce back. He sort of got his mental back together again. He's actually pretty good. So no, the joke is, whereas KT's lineup is actually worse than it looks on paper, this is better than it looks on paper. D+ isn't bad, bro. They're not a bad team at all.
Yeah, a lot of the criticism you could have is with some of their shot calling. I mean, with any aiming team, you're always going to have aiming problems, and that is that he's just incredibly expensive. He is the win condition, especially in strong ADC metas with a lot of these hyper carries. But the thing about aiming is he absolutely can deliver on that front, right? People will rightly criticize him for some of his egregious ints, and he does have the brain fart. The problem is when he dies, he takes your entire team's bag of gold with him, because he takes so much farm. He is literally the highest economy player in the entire league when it comes to gold, percentage of CS, all of these factors.
Oh, he's greedy as fuck, yeah.
Yes, and the team has to play around that. But, the upside is that he actually also does hard carry games at times. You want to see something entertaining, go watch the last couple of games of the Hanwha Life series, and aiming almost just fucking destroys
he's just
Hanwha. He dies
but it's
in
clear, for that one, Monty, I actually had a bet for that game on fucking Hanwha, and I can tell you, I was fucking sweating bullets in that third game, of course. It looked like this guy was going to be the hero and fucking carry on Kaiser.
Yeah. And he very nearly did.
There.
I mean, people will criticize him for the arm guard usage in that last fight, but that is such a hard fight to play. And I don't even know if what he did necessarily was the wrong thing. There's a lot of differing opinions about, I think, how he could have played that out on a micro level, but it was also a game where he spent 2 games being he was 14-0 in the second game, and he was 14-0 for almost the entirety of the third game as well, up until that very last team fight. In that game, that match really was on a razor's edge. So, I mean, real big credit to D+. I feel like they continue to get better. Lucid continues to get better. He's drawing a lot of bans now. It's like teams are definitely respect vanning his Vi and Lee Sin, which opens up a lot of picks for other players. They're willing to like test the fringes of the meta and play Showmaker on very good Showmaker champs, even if they're not the most meta champs at the time being. And they're stacking up their gold on aiming in a way that makes sense. So D+ is still a very good team. There's not quite there yet, unfortunately. And at least
here's the obvious angle, Monty. The obvious angle is this, right? Being as Lucid actually does look like he's tracking to be the truth. Like he's going to be a good player
yes.
who can be on like a contender, etc. The obvious move to me is this. You just keep the core and you figure it out. Probably Kingen. You just get like replace Kinger with a better top laner. Dude, you'd be right there. You'd be like a team that could go to the finals. Like this isn't even a bad squad.
If you replace Kellen with a shot caller too, I think you'd be doing something. Because remember, they tried
That's
that.
Another one.
Remember, they tried to get Bible in there because they thought last year, because they thought this would be a better situation, right? You know, the shot calling on D+, the voice continues. So, I mean, I think you have a choice. Like, is Lucid going to develop into that guy? Or do you get a support that can do that? Because I don't think, like, Kellen is not by any means the greatest individual player of the support player in the LCK, but he is an LCK caliber player, and he does have good games. To pretend otherwise is ridiculous, but he's not really, you know, what this team needs. It's the same way that Delight leaving Gen G was a bummer in some ways, but because last year I would say probably Delight was a better player across the entire year than Lehens. Lehens was a fraudulent MVP.
Oh, of course.
You know, he was a fraudulent MVP. Like both BDD and Keen were robbed in summer of like that MVP that should have been one of theirs. But Lehens is good. But what Lehens does is he provides the shot calling that left with Peanut. Like Chovy has developed into like a mutual shot caller with Lehens on this current iteration of Gen G. But if they had kept Delight, I think Gen G would have been a worse team. And I think if you get somebody even who's like maybe a little bit worse than Kellen, but actually has better macro sense and better shot calling, D+ actually could go somewhere. I mean, a crazy thing to say too, Thorin, is honestly like Perfect on KT right now. I would rather see him in this lineup than Kingen. Perfect is actually getting very good also. Like, if you're going to like go in on young talent, then why not do it? Like,
no, the sad thing is, to me,
what have you got?
This year's more of a write-off. It's more like for next year.
But if you got, let's say you don't want to break the bank and you're D+, what happens if you get Perfect and Pleta on this roster? I think it's better. I think it's a better team. Pleta's like actually very good as a support player, and I think he's very much underrated.
No, to me, the thing is, the way the LCK is right now, in theory, D+ can still challenge for the last world spot. But the difference is, I don't think they would do that much at Worlds. I just think that they actually have, considering, remember, dude, in a world where Canyon leaves your team, you're never supposed to be able to recover from that. There's no like pivot that gets you back to the same spot. Bro, they could really, if they make the right off-season moves at the end of this year, have a better lineup than they had the last few years with Showmaker and Canyon. They could have a better one. Not the old prime one in 2021 and 2020, of course, but like the last few years, they were just like at best a dark horse. This actually looks like they could for real challenge to be like the third or second best LCK team with the core they've got. Like it's not bad. Like you just start with those three players, fucking Lucid, Showmaker, and Aiming. Bro, that's enough right there. Those are like known quantities. The Lucid guy, like you said, could even get better. He could just get better even. Obviously, he could also degrade, but right now I've seen all the signs have looked good for me. He even looked like he settled in the first split. He's gotten good this split. Like I can see why they promoted him, mate. He is legit.
Yeah, I mean, he and Thanatos were like the most hyped up players coming out of the Korean tier 2 scene. You know, now there's like KT's challengers roster, which is, you know, people are hyping up like them as a unit, which might be interesting to kind of see them depending on what KT does and if KT wants to actually spend money next year. Because the weird thing about KT as an org, guys, is they like will spend money, and then the next year they won't spend money, and then the next year they will spend money. Like they just like seesaw back and forth in terms of spending money. It's very strange to watch. It's like their budget gets cut one year, but then it's like tripled the next year. Then it's like, you know, 1/4 of what it was. Then it's 8 times what it was. Like I don't understand really how they allocate money, because KT never seems to have like a consistent amount of money year to year, regardless of the performance that they have. Because like you would have thought, wow, KT probably wants to keep that roster or something close to it because it's really quite good by the time they played last summer.
Good. Yeah, of course.
And nah, we're just not going to do that. Just hold on to BDD. Everybody else just gets eliminated from the team.
No, the
and we're going to pick
thing
up
for me about that was, like, I know what you mean. It seems like every 2 years they just remember, like, shit, we're supposed to be KT. Why don't we spend this money and become a contender again, like T1?
Yes.
And then every time they do it, they don't
get like
do what we just talked about D+. They don't ever do the pivot. Like, the obvious move to me was the idea. By the way, that's why I also say there should be a lower bracket of Worlds, Monty. We now have to just pretend KT sucked last year.
Yep.
They were absolutely, like, on paper, the second best Korean team for most of the fucking year. Like, they were looking awesome until playoffs. They used to look dope in the regular splits, both of them. Then what happened was they fell off a bit in the playoffs. And then the problem at Worlds was they weren't even that bad. They just lost to JDG. Like, if you look at that roster,
they also
again,
had the hardest strength of schedule. They had the hardest Swiss strength of schedule as well, which was ridiculous.
Yep. There's the thing. You wouldn't wipe that lineup. You would make, again, like one change. Like, the obvious one to me would maybe get like someone. By the way, here's the obvious angle. Since you knew Peanut was leaving, maybe get Peanut instead of Cause or something. Like, bro, you could have done a pivot on that lineup and still made it really good. You had like the carries in all the positions. What do you want?
I mean, even if you're KT, I would rather see them like promote their tier 2 team and then just like wait and see who's good and then, you know, iterate off of that. What they do is when they don't spend money, they still spend too much money, and then they get a bunch of washed motherfuckers like Pioshik and Barrel.
They do get a lot of washed players, don't they? Yeah.
So it's like what's annoying about KT is they're either like assembling a super team or it's just like washed city, and there's never like, oh, we're going to develop this player as our star player and then like they're going to be with us forever. They never do that, by the way. There was never like a faker equivalent. They had Score. That was it. And they did keep Score for a long time. And Score was the core of their team. But, you know, Score had to go through years where he had fucking bums for teammates. And then he had 2018 KT, which was like the God roster, right? And I just wish like we would actually see them develop a player that they actually build around over a long period of time, because KT has just lacked an identity as a team. And that's my problem with them. Like BDD is, sure, he's been there for the past couple of years, but he's been everywhere. I mean, BDD's been on every fucking team, right? He's not like the KT guy in the way that Score was, or the way that, you know, Showmaker is, right? Still on D+. It just feels like very strange the way that KT operates, because they don't actually commit to a rebuilding process or using the rookies that they're developing in their tier 2 scene and then kind of like weed out the bad ones and then replace them with like currently powerful players to like make a push. They instead just like disassemble a perfectly good roster and then fill it with bums this year, and we get this iteration of KT.
I know what you mean, though. Like, the obvious angle you would have done is if you'd have just promoted the overall team, you would just have them hard play around perfect and see if he really is like the god carry. And then next year, you just put in the appropriate pieces to have the good squad. Whereas instead, what you do is like, actually, this year's KT is very much what you're talking about. It's where you have like a bunch of players where the name value is there. But actually, I think half the problem you end up with immediately is when someone has the name value, but they're not actually that player anymore, you're going to have a warped team setup, aren't you? You're going to have players where you're playing around them like they were the old MVP player of the league, but they're not anymore. They're just like an all right mid laner or fucking AD or something. So that's half the problem is that, like, I also think that's disjointed, because if you're perfect, Monty, you can't just come in and go, hey, BDD and Deft, sit down, man. I am here. Like, no, you're not. Even though you should be here to carry, you aren't here to carry, bro. That's BDD and Deft. You don't know who they are. Like, they are literally like the mainstays of the league for like 10 years. So yeah, you should all look at that point.
I have another question for you, Thorin, which is like, so KT is basically just DRX, the world's winning roster of DRX, except with a better mid laner in BDD, and at this point, maybe a better top laner in Perfect. So if DRX was a totally legitimate world champion, why is this team so bad? Right? You're like, it's actually just a better version of DRX.
Like, if you ever wanted to see that Koreans aren't like the perfect human specimens who just have leveled up and we're all behind them, bro, even they buy into that garbage that DRX was good. Because how many fucking times have people signed 2 DRX players at the same? It's mental. These guys have had way too many gigs. Like, bro, we were just talking. How is King even still on those teams? Like, I don't get it, mate. It's like the Korea produces top lane talent out of its arse all the time, and this guy's just been on fucking some really good squads. Like, I don't know how though. I don't know how they just believe in that. Because the problem is, you know this, like, one of the things that in a way I respect, but I also hate about Koreans is if you win, they will absolutely just give you all your credit. They'll just be like, well, you were better than me, and that means what you did was right, and how you practiced was right, and your team was better. Even though sometimes those might not be true. Like, obviously, me and you live in denial. Like, JDG was better, even though team won. But Koreans don't do that. To a Korean, the second the win happens, whoever won does get to be the better team, and they did everything right, and they practiced harder. They believe it all. They have, like, very much, you can see how, like, there's a guiding ethos that makes them great at the game, but this is where the blind spot occurs. It's like, obviously, here's another example, Monty. Should I tell you another example that is infuriating if you think about it? How the fuck in summer last year, Monty, was every player on KT voted best in their role, but then that lineup doesn't even stay together? Bro, the whole of Korea told you you have the best 5-man lineup and you don't even re-sign that whole squad. What is this? It's just bollocks, isn't it? It's absolute bollocks, mate. You know it's not true. Everyone knows it's not true. Even those players knew it wasn't true. By the way, that collectively, that is one of the most egregious fan voting ever. Lehen's MVP. He would be bottom of our list for MVP on that team. There's literally like 3 other people I'd pick ahead of him. And then the whole KT roster, including Cars, like, they're just all the best players in Korea. What are we talking about? What are we doing there?
And then they get dumpstered by T1 with Faker coming off an injury in the playoffs. No, outrageous. It's all right, Matt. Thorin, as Wolf and I discussed, it's going to be even more egregious when Pays is somehow first team All-Pro this split instead of Viper.
Yeah,
that's how it's going to go.
Okay. The worst thing is, I'll actually give credit to the LPL for this. LPL is actually pretty good at sometimes giving people the status even when their team isn't like the second best team or whatever. Bro, Viper's career is going to look so dirty if you look on Leaguepedia and you didn't watch the games. Like, this guy, like I say, put it this way, unironically, and I don't care if you think I'm glazing him. If I had to pick, this guy right now, Monty, in all of League of Legends is like a candidate for Player of the Year. Think about for the whole year. This guy's just been unbelievable from day one till now, pretty much. He very rarely ever... How was he ever the reason they even lost a match? Like a series? I don't think so. No. I feel like he just always gives you the carry potential. Sometimes they let him down. He's mega, isn't he? Like, look, I pretty sure I have a take that I often connect elsewhere, which is me and Kira from my Discord. We have the same take, basically, which is I don't really believe that, like, Ruler's playing, like, way worse this split. I think his solo laners are just way worse than they used to be, though Shea's actually pretty good, it turns out. Like, Yagao isn't Knight. That's the problem. And I did tell you the whole time Ruler and the Knight were there is half of what made Ruler unbeatable is he had one of the most insane team fighting mids also waiting off on the side of the fight, so you could never just engage on him. And so I actually think that Ruler's still amazing. But the difference is when you give him comparable players to Viper, Viper looks better. I just got to say it. He actually looks like a better player. Looks more crack. Because the difference is I think Ruler's more like he has like a very beautiful style because it's very efficient. Viper is just like unbelievable mechanical ability, mate. For me, it's him and Jackie Love are the two that have just blown my mind the last few years in ADC. I think they are so fucking good when they're on. When they're on, they look unbeatable.
Yeah,
like I've always thought in League, the defining analytical principle is this. In theory, the best role should always be mid lane. But when you see the truly godlike ADCs and top laners, bro, they make their role look broken. They make it look like when the Shy was at his absolute peak, you would think like top's just the most strong role in the whole game. You can't beat him. It's like that when Viper goes off. There's fights Viper's in where I'm like, bro, I don't even need perfect peel. Just give him some peel and he'll win this fight. He's just too good. It's why I knew Zeri coming back would mean it was game over for everyone else. Like, mate, you can't give someone like him that champion. He will fucking tear the game up. I can't wait to see Hanwha. By the way, there's one angle. Bear in mind, we banged them all. Yeah, now they've sort of... Now, if this Hanwha goes to Worlds, I'll enjoy it, bro. This team could do something. Sure. They could mess up a lot of fucking LPL teams, I think.
I'm concerned about the meta shift always with Zeka. You know what I mean? Like that is a very big concern as to whether they kind of turn back into a pumpkin or not. But the meta right now is great for them. It's great for them. Like Ivern AD mids is fucking rad for Zeka and for Peanut. So and obviously Viper, as we just discussed, is wonderful on these kind of champions. So I think they are being boosted by the meta, so I want to hold off on that just a little bit until we get further evidence. But I do think that they're pretty convincingly the second best team in Korea, right? I mean, what else do they have to do to prove it? It was very close against T+. They smashed T1. They won the close series against T1 that they probably should have lost in the first one, but then they smashed them in the second, a week later in the second matchup. So who else is really out there right now? Like LCK is a pretty top heavy league. So we probably should check in on the LPL because we're actually just as of today done.
Last thing on Hanwha Life as well is, bro, that's how you know this is like a charmed fucking split if you're Hanwha, because even the fucking Lucian mid pick turns out to be like fucking dope on Zika. Like he doesn't have that many champions, guys. Like he actually looked good on that. Like he looks like could be as long as he stays on this patch, like he's going to do some work.
Yeah. Definitely fits in his wheelhouse, and if God help his opponents if Akali and Silas come back also, because his ceiling on some of these champions is crazy. It's just that his versatility is very low.
Oh no, that is the craziest thing, because half the time we just have to downplay the fact that he's not the player he was when he won World. Oh, here's the thing though: if World somehow was a patch that had like the sort of bullshit like melee/assassin champions, he like the player, dude, they would be a dark horse to win the tournament for real, like for reals.
Well,
yeah, with this team, I think they could.
Peanut performing internationally is always like the concern, right? Peanut doesn't travel
eventually,
well.
Eventually, he's going to trip over and win one of these matches, man. I can't give up on you, Peanut. I'm on my brokeback mountain. I can't stop loving you, Peanut. I can't. I never will.
I love Peanut.
I never will.
I love Peanut.
At least because the other thing I also love as well, Monty, is I also really love that narrative journey where a player goes like Jankos from being the mechanical lead-in player to being the brain jungler who's just the smartest guy and you can never catch him out on the map and they can play for me. I actually really love that archetype of junglers. I think it's really beautiful to watch when you can do it.
Peanut is legit one of my favorite players to watch. So I mean, I just know he's burned me too many times. Like for every fucking insane pathing run and like Poppy flashing a Drake pit so we can hex flash under your turret gank that we see, I also watch him just walk into the enemy jungle at Worlds and dies. So
here's the problem, Monty. As someone who has taken these really dangerous fringe case gambles, like back when people said Simple was too toxic to ever be the best player or Device used to choke. The problem is this, Monty. The worse that counter narrative gets, like they do choke every time, they do fuck up when you expect to win. Even when they're the favorite, they find a way to lose. The problem is it makes it even more of a thrill, though, if you double down on the bet and it ever comes through, Monty. So your problem is this, sir, is if you decide finally, you know what, Peanut, I can't keep doing this to me or you. I've got to let you go. I've got to cut you loose. If he then goes on and wins Worlds, you would be so fucking salty if you like pulled against him, bro. Because he'd be like, no, wait, I was the original one. No, I was on the train. They're like, well, I thought you cut ties, buddy. Didn't you let him go? Like, no. Like, so in some ways, you have to go. It's like Katie Russell. You have to go down with the shit, Monty. You got to just go down with this one. You got to just.
I'm done going down with KT this year.
Peanut and Chovy forever. No. I'm all in on Chovy, Knight, Peanut. Fuck it. You know what? I'm still all in on Froggen. He doesn't even play League of Legends anymore. But if he came back, I believe he'd still be better than Nisky and be the MVP of the league. So never stop believing, mate. Never stop believing. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.